excited.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the March 20th Lebanon Plan Commission meeting. We will begin the meeting, as we always do, with the roll call. Madam Secretary.
Okay. Diane Scott. Here. Dan Bayshore.
Here.
Kevin Krulik.
Here.
Corey Coons.
Here.
Brian Tandy. Absent. Keith Campbell.
Here.
Heather Schaller. Here. Ali Mullen. Here. Lori Gross. Here.
Thank you very much. First item we have up is the easiest part of our evening, which is the approval of the minutes. Do we have any questions before we would entertain a motion? Seeing none, although I would entertain a motion to approve the minutes of
I make a motion, we approve the minutes as written.
We've got a motion. Do we have a second? A second from Keith. All those please signify with an aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Thank you very much. That takes us to old business and commission. If I could get consent, I was hoping to simply slide B up to A. So we were considering docket 2301 before 2303. Would you guys be okay with that slide? All right. So we are then going to discuss, it's item B on the agenda, if you have that in your hands. This item was continued from February 21st. This is docket number 2301, Indiana Economic Development Corporation requesting primary plat approval for a proposed two-lot subdivision for Eli Lilly and Company. The property is located on 602.42 acre parcel, generally located to the north of County Road 375 North, to the east of I-65, and to the south of County Road 450 North. Property is zoned ID, General Industrial, and is in the Interstate Overlay District. Ben?
Good evening, Commission. I've got a little bit of cold, so I'll stumble my way through these, but I'll be very efficient with my discussion tonight. This is the second presentation of the primary plat. We did an initial presentation to you back in January, so this is coming back and continued a couple of months. It's coming back for final approval here this evening. Just a real quick on process. This is a primary plat request, and that is an administrative review process by the Plan Commission. This is not an item that is a recommendation that goes forward to the council. This is an item that is an approval by the Plan Commission this evening. And in terms of review, we're looking to make sure that the lots that are being created meet all of our lot standard requirements, and then also that if there's any dedications of right-of-way necessarily, that those are also shown on the plat. So those are the primary items that we're looking for here. And I will quick run through those here first in a second for you, and then get to the recommendation. So if they would pull up the screen here, we'll just do a quick recap here. Outlined in yellow is the site in question. Interstate 65 is to the west, CSX Railroad is to the east, 450 North is the north property line, and 375 North is this southern property line, and then 150 West runs north-south as you head south from the site. One change that has occurred since the January meeting is, and we talked about this at the January meeting, is there was going to be a request to vacate this portion of 150 West that runs through the site so that they would have a fully contiguous site. That request was approved by the council in February, so that right-of-way has been vacated, and so that was one significant change, and that obviously was a significant thing that needed to happen before we could approve the plat, since they were showing that being vacated. So that's the overall site, and here is the plat. This is about 600 acres total. They're creating two parcels. Parcel 1 is this northern, much larger parcel. It's about 500 acres. Parcel 2 is this much smaller one. It's about 80 acres here to the south. Again, you can see in red here, they're showing where the right-of-way is being vacated on 150 West, highlighted in red. And then there are two places where they are dedicating rights-of-way. One is associated with 375 North, and there's a 50-foot half right-of-way that's being dedicated to accommodate future road improvements on 375 North. And then on 450 North, they're dedicating a 35-foot half right-of-way on 450 North. These are associated with the road classifications that have been assigned to these roads as part of the LEAP district, and so those half rights-of-way dedicated will accommodate those road improvements for those two roads. That is really the extent of the plat. Obviously, the lots more than meet all of our lot size requirements and setbacks and all those things, and with the dedications of right-of-way as necessary. I will point out on 150 West, there is no right-of-way dedication there. The way they have designed that road improvement, All the right-of-way will be dedicated to the east, so there is no dedication of right-of-way on this, what would be parcel 2. It will all be dedicated essentially from the edge of pavement to the east. So all necessary right-of-way will be dedicated in that form as opposed to be dedicating on this property. That's why we don't see any right-of-way dedication along that road, but they will be dedicated to the east to accommodate all necessary road improvements there. So that's a quick rundown of the primary plat. They have addressed, I did put a lengthy list of TAC comments in here. Actually, many of those comments are more related to the development plan than they are the plat, but they're both kind of interrelated. As I mentioned, that they more than meet all of the parcel requirements for the general industrial zoning district. And with that, in review, the subject, or the submitted primary plat as presented, Lebanon Planning staff finds compliance with the Unified Development Ordinance requirements for the subject site, and staff recommends approval of the subject primary plat. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions if there are any.
Do we have any questions from the commission? I've got just two, if we could have the map back.
Yep.
So, just 2 points of clarification. So I believe there were some changes east of the railroad track. That's going to be entirely separate, correct?
That is separate from this plat,
Okay.
yes. That is actually, it would run roughly in this area here east,
Yep.
and then,
Okay.
yeah, so it would be a separate project from this.
And then just to confirm, I know 450 at the interstate dead ends into a private driveway, correct?
I believe so, yes.
So this still accommodates, obviously, that private drive?
It does.
Okay, perfect. Any other questions from the commission? All right, so with that, this is a public hearing, so I will go ahead and, oh, my apologies. Does the applicant have anything to say? We'll go that route first, and then the public hearing. My apologies.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Kent Franzen. I'm an attorney at 225 West Main Street, Lebanon. I represent the Indiana Economic Development Corporation in this matter. One of the provisions of the purchase agreement between the IEDC and Eli Lilly and Company was that the IEDC agreed to arrange for the platting of this property in as many lots, as many or as few lots as Lilly felt they needed. Lilly has made the decision as part of the development of their project and the layout of their buildings that they would like 2 lots. So that's how that was chosen, and the IEDC is carrying the lead on that application, file the application. Ben has outlined the process. It's not usually controversial. It's division of land into 1 or more parcels requires a plat in this context, and we have that. It will be the same owners of both parcels, both lots. Each lot meets the requirements of the ordinance: sufficient acreage, sufficient frontage, sufficient setbacks to be its own freestanding, legal, conforming lot. So with that, we're going to present here in a minute the development plan in more detail. Mrs. Metzel of Taft is going to do that on behalf of Lilly. So if you have questions about the operational aspects of the project, that would probably be better suited for that presentation. But if you have any questions for me about the platting of the property into 2 lots, I'm happy to try to address it.
Any questions from the commission? All right.
Thank you.
Mr. Franson, thank you, sir. So that being said, now I'll open the public hearing. Keep in mind, please keep your comments to 3 minutes or less. And also, this is only in regards to the primary plat, okay? So this is in regards to docket number 23-01. And if you could, please avoid any duplication. So public hearing is now officially open. Feel free to step up to the microphone and give his name and address. Seeing no sudden movement towards the microphone, I will go ahead and close the public hearing in regards to docket number 23-01, and I would entertain a motion. Ben, do you have any additional?
I don't, I was just going to come back after there were any final questions before you went to the motion, so.
No? Want a
Seeing-
motion?
Yeah, so seeing no questions, we'll entertain a motion.
I make a motion to approve the subject primary plat.
So we have a motion to approve
Second.
and a second. We'll go ahead and call the roll.
Okay. Diane Scott? Yes. Dan Bayshore?
Yes.
Kevin Krulik?
Yes.
Corey Coontz?
Yes.
Heather Schaller?
Yes.
Keith Campbell?
Yes.
Ally Mullen?
Yes.
And Lori Gross.
Yes.
All right, thank you very much. So with that, docket 23-01 is approved on the primary plat. We'll then move on to the other piece of old business, which is docket number 23-03. This was also continued from the February Plan Commission meeting. And this is Eli Lilly and Company requesting development plan approval for the construction of a multi-building pharmaceutical research and development and manufacturing campus. Property is located on 602.42 acres, generally located in the exact same location as we talked about earlier. And just a reminder, this is general industrial zoning and in the interstate overlay district. So Ben, I believe we're getting some context from you as well.
Thank you, Mr. Coots. If they want to pull up the screen for you, we'll just dive right into this. Again, we had a very lengthy presentation on the site in January, both from myself and from Eli Lilly. So what I'm going to do is kind of hit some of the key points that we discussed then, talk to you a little bit about some of the changes and modifications to the site plan from what you saw in January, and then just hit really some of the key elements here. And then there was also some questions about some of the, I guess I'll call them environmental permitting that are associated with this site that aren't necessarily through our office, but are things that happen congruent to this application before they would start construction. Talk a little bit about that and how that works, just to answer some of those questions too. So just to kind of go over, orient you to the site, you've got two projects here. You've got the LP1, which is the larger of the two sites that you see here. LP2 is down in the southwest corner here. There is a large detention facility sitting kind of in the central western portion of the site. And then this is the first change, is the solar area has been consolidated to one area. If you recall from January, they had a solar field that ran essentially the length of the interstate before. It was kind of long and narrow. What they've done is they've consolidated down to a much smaller area, at least from a north-south perspective, and put them in this area that's kind of surrounded by the legal drain that you see here on the north and east side of the parcel. So that is the first change, that they've consolidated that to a smaller area from a north-south perspective, so a smaller visual impact and footprint from the interstate, the way this is situated. The next change that you'll see here, I'm going to have to zoom in because it's a little hard to see at this scale. And hopefully my computer doesn't freeze up because these files are so big. Certainly doesn't like it. We'll give it a second here to. It's going to move one pixel at a time, it looks like. Here we go. So the second change, and this is not a significant change, but the Welcome Center actually did not meet the 100-foot setback requirement the way it had been situated from that property line, the right-of-way line that you see here. So they did have to move the Welcome Center back so it met this 100-foot front yard setback like you see here. And the other change associated with the Welcome Center, if you remember, they kind of had that entrance drive coming off at an angle off of 150 West before. And at the request of the city engineer, it has been changed to more of a typical 90-degree intersection with 150 West that you see located here. So they did change the way the entrance drives work, so it's a more traditional turn off of the main drive here, and then scooted this back. Couple more changes, and you'll be able to see this a little bit better here in a little bit, and actually Lily will probably talk about what this actually means, but I'll talk about more just from the site planning perspective. If you recall, the two peptides buildings are kind of twin buildings that you see located here, marked as peptides. There is now a third building that's been added to this that's related to the operations of these two facilities. So they have added an additional building to the site plan from what you saw before. This is essentially a 3-story traditional office building. I'll show you an elevation here in a second so you can get an idea what this whole area looks like here. So that was another change that was made to add an additional building in the site plan. This does still meet all setback requirements for the general industrial and zoning district. In fact, it's twice it's about 200 feet from the property line, whereas only 100 feet is required. So again, still more than meets all of the setback requirements of the zoning district. Just again, for their operations, that just created some efficiencies for them, and they had the space to be able to do it there. The one final change, and again, this is a smaller change, is the rail siding has actually been swapped. So as before, the trains would back onto the site from the south. Now they will back onto the site from the north. So it basically just flip-flopped it, so it's facing a different direction. And that was based on a conversation they had with CSX of how that would work. So those are the primary changes to the overall site plan. There were a few other tweaks here and there to parking lots and things like that, but in terms of the primary substantive changes to the site, that's really it. Just kind of a general overview again, as I mentioned, you can see the series of buildings that would be associated with the LP1 campus here. Peptides, admin, oligo, small molecule, central utility building, solid waste building, and then the warehouse is just off the screen on the north end here. So that represents the main part of the LP1 campus, and then LP2 was a separate facility to the south here, the proposed gene therapy that you see on the south side of this parcel here. Just a real quick recap at the March 6th Board of Zoning Appeals meeting, which was a couple weeks ago. Lily was approved for 4 variance requests, the first being building height. I believe we talked about that during our January presentation. They have buildings that range anywhere from 60 feet up to 125 feet. In the general industrial zoning district, there is a 50-foot height max, so they did get a variance approved to allow those additional heights. Second is building orientation. Due to the fact that this entire 600-acre site is in the interstate overlay district, even though only the first 400 feet are technically in the overlay, the entire site is subject to those requirements. It would suggest that this building that's about 1,500 feet away from the interstate, the front, which is technically supposed to face the interstate, but they wanted to certainly face towards the inside of their campus. So there was a variance approved to allow them to face the front of the building towards the interior of the campus. They did make some modifications on the elevation of the building that faces the interstate, so it looked more like a front, but they did get that variance approved. Same with the loading berth. They do have 2 loading berths that are on this side of the building that face towards the interstate, and they'd get a variance approved to allow them to place those there. I'll show you the landscape plan in a second. You can see that there's going to be significant landscaping between the interstate and those loading berths that I think would be almost impossible to see the berths from the interstate. The final one was mechanical equipment screening, and that's related to this central area of their LP1 campus, where essentially all the mechanicals, tank farm, et cetera, is all located in this area here. Our ordinance kind of lumps those into everything from a small piece of HVAC equipment up to something this big. I mean, this is a significant size mechanical equipment area. So we typically would require there to be a wall that's 2 feet taller than the equipment. So if you've got a piece of HVAC equipment that's 6 feet tall, you have to go 8 feet tall. When you got a tank farm that starts at 60 feet, putting up a 62-foot wall to screen this area is not really very feasible. So we work with them to come up with some alternative ways to screen that from view from the neighboring properties, and they did get a variance approved to allow them to do that, alternative screening methods. Let me zoom back out a little bit here and go to my other screens. Just to touch on a few more things before we invite the applicant up. In fact, I'll be doing better once I get off this screen. I think that's the highest. So just to walk through a few more items. Again, we looked at these items in the January meeting just as a reminder of the landscape package that's being proposed for the site. You can see there's extensive buffer landscaping provided on all sides of the property. And just to give you a quick summary of how many plants this entails, just in the buffer plantings. I gotta find my page here. The perimeter landscape plan includes approximately 2,700 trees and 4,200 shrubs. So that's just the planting requirements for the buffer. So there's substantial landscaping and also mounding. There will be a 10 to 14 foot tall mound along 375 and essentially a 14-foot tall mound that wraps the north and east sides of the property. So we've got extensive mounding plus landscaping, more than meeting the buffer requirements of this zoning district. Let me go to the next page, and this will show you the interior landscaping. So that's just the buffer landscaping. Here's the interior. And again, at the scale, it's kind of hard to figure out how many trees and shrubs are on here, but you can essentially see they're reforesting some areas of the site. And then they're also providing all required parking lot perimeter interior and building-based landscaping on each one of these buildings that you see here. You can see the parking lots highlighted in purple, and all those meet all of our parking lot landscaping requirements. So when you add the perimeter or the buffer landscaping plus all the other site landscaping, the total package is about 6,300 trees and 7,800 shrubs for a total of a little over 14,000 plants that are on their landscape plan. So again, significant size site, that kind of gives you an idea of the scale. On the lighting plan, again, I'll just point out that they have met all the requirements for all of our lightings to make sure that there's not any sorts of light spillage to neighboring properties. On the parking, again, as I mentioned, each one of these are highlighted in purple. This is a parking lot associated with each one of the buildings, and they have shown that they meet all the required parking for each one of those buildings. I provided a summary of that in the staff report, and they more than meet all of the parking requirements for each one of those facilities. Signage plan, they did show a ground sign that would be near their entry that meets all of our requirements, and each building has wall signage that meets all of our requirements of the ordinance. And finally, architecture, I'll just quick show you. I mentioned I had a zoom into this. This is a rendering showing those two peptides building plus that new admin building that's associated with those two. So this would be peptide building 1, and then into the distance peptide building 2, and then that new building, the admin building that's associated here. So this is, you're basically hovering over the intersection of 375 and 150, looking to the northeast towards these buildings. So that just gives you an idea of the type of architecture that's being proposed on the entire campus that you see here with these buildings. Again, as I mentioned, this is a 125-foot tall building. These are the taller of the two buildings, so this is significantly shorter than the new building they're proposing. But that just kind of gives you the idea of the architecture that's being proposed here. A couple other things I want to touch on. They have already received drainage and mass grading approval, so their drainage approval is already in place. They have responded to all TAC comments and provided plan updates. So they said on the 8 pages of TAC comments that were in the staff report, so they've addressed all of those items and have responded to those adequately. They are already in the process of finalizing a review of their wastewater contents with our Lebanon utilities. They have provided the contents of their wastewater to them, and actually Lebanon Utilities has already determined that it's not going to need significant pretreatment. Their levels of waste stream all are within the requirements for our plant, so they don't even need to do any significant pretreatment, so we can accept those waste streams, no problem. That's already done. And then one final note on some of the other environmental permitting. So as it relates to that wastewater utility permitting, they, again, as I just discussed, they have to provide all the contents of their waste stream to the Lebanon Utilities to make sure we can accept it and it's not going to affect our plant. If they were to ever change or add additional products that would change the content of their waste streams, they would have to report those to utilities and update their permitting. So we're constantly involved with that. I have also talked to Lebanon Utilities. It's something, obviously this is a unique project. They do occasionally go out and monitor the waste streams at various points along the path. And I asked them if have we ever done a full-time monitor, just basically put one in one of the manholes just south of Eli Lilly, just put a full-time monitor in there so we're constantly monitoring it just to make sure nothing significant would happen. They haven't necessarily done that before, but they said that they would talk about that and see if that's something that would make some sense to do. Would not be hard to do and allow us basically to have full-time monitoring of anything coming downstream to the plant. Allow us more easily for us to shut down a certain area if we've got something coming that would be bad for the plant. So they're talking about that, looking at that. That's one possible solution. Air permitting is another thing. That is something that actually happens. It's not a local permit. That happens at the state and federal level. Although our office is alerted anytime somebody applies for an air permit, so we're aware when those happen and when they're approved. And if there's ever a time where somebody violates their permits, we're also notified that. And again, if they were to change the contents of what they're putting into the air and they're outside of their permit requirements, they have to apply for a new permit, we're notified. So again, we're involved whenever there's a change, whenever there's updates to those permittings, and so our office is always made aware, the city's always made aware as those things happen. So again, there's a lot of regulating agencies for any project like this amongst all the projects we have in the city to make sure that all the I's are dotted and T's are crossed as it relates to some of those environmental issues. So that's a real quick rundown. I know Eli Lilly will address some of those things as well during their presentation, but with that, I'll just mention that given the fact that they already have drainage and mass grading approval, they've responded to all TAC comments. We do not have any conditions to place on the approval of their development plan. So with that, staff has recommended, upon review of the submitted development plan, we find compliance with the Unified Development Ordinance requirements and recommend approval of the subject development plan. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions you have for me before we turn it over to the applicant to provide some additional information for you.
Any questions from the commission for Ben before we hear from the applicant?
Just one question, Ben. The solar field, is there, I don't see a spot where it says where the inverter is going to be. Usually that's a somewhat
So that's
decent-sized building.
It's, yeah, at this level of detail, that's not showing exactly where the inverters are. So that's something when we get into the permitting stage.
Okay.
They'll have to provide us exactly where those are located, and they'll have to meet all our requirements for solar and those things. And certainly they'll have to meet all our noise ordinance requirements as relate to some of those things that do create a noise. So while the panels themselves, like we've talked about, the panels themselves don't create noise, but the inverters and some of the associated equipment do. So my guess is if you're standing adjacent to the interstate, you're going to hear the trucks on the interstate more than you will anything related to that anyway, but we'll definitely make sure that they meet all of our standards.
Awesome. Any other questions for Ben? Seeing none, I'd like to welcome the applicant up.
Hi, good evening. My name is Jennifer Massey from Eli Lilly and Company. So thanks for the time this evening. I'm going to go through, and thank you to Ben too for covering some of the development plan details. I'll go through some of the highlights of the development plan, and then I'd also like to take a little time to share some additional information on our site operations to give you a little bit of a feel for what we'll be doing on site. So this slide here shows a rendering of the finished campus with the relative size, location, and orientation of the buildings. Ben noticed some of the changes. Those are updated on our engineering drawings. They're not updated on this rendering specifically, but those are the solar field, the 90-degree turn in our entrance, and then specifically on the peptide buildings. What we have done there, and I'm going to try and point it out with my cursor here. So at the front of each peptide manufacturing building, we have a shared common administrative area. So this is where our technical support folks, where our in-process lab would be located. And what we've done, because those two buildings are identical, is we've combined that into one so that all of those technical support folks will be in one shared space versus in two separate buildings. So that's the change related to those buildings. The design intent for the campus has always been to have two separate manufacturing sites here. The larger of the two sites is LP1. That's located kind of in the south central area of the campus. Ben highlighted that. That is an API manufacturing site, so producing active pharmaceutical ingredients. The active pharmaceutical ingredient, again, is what produces the therapeutic effect in the medicines that we make. The smaller of the two sites is a cell and gene therapy site. That has one manufacturing building and then an interconnected utilities area, and that's located near the lower central part of the campus. We spoke briefly about this last time, but the reason we're building these sites is to fulfill our purpose of creating medicines that help people around the world. We are, as a company, very excited about the innovative pipeline and the opportunity and potential that we have to impact more patients with our medicines. And we are very excited that we will potentially be doing that here in Lebanon. So the two sites will provide cutting-edge new technologies, advanced manufacturing platforms with fully automated controls and best-in-class equipment. Between the two sites, we'll be producing medicines for patients who are facing illnesses such as diabetes, cancer, autoimmune disease, and other severe illnesses. So I wanted to highlight a few of the changes, and Ben noted some of these as well, that we've made as we've gone through the planning process and worked with the city. So we've been engaging with the city, and we've appreciated all the feedback that we've gotten through the tax cycle and through our engagement there. For berming, we've gone above and beyond the required berms on the south side of the campus. Those will be 10 to 14 feet. That is greater than the requirements. And we've also, as been noted, added additional landscaping to provide more screening on site. For landscaping, we will also meet all requirements. That includes our external landscaping, internal landscaping, and solar array landscaping as well. We'll be planting more than 6,000 trees and over 7,000 shrubs. This slide here is a view of some of our buildings from 375 North, so that would be the closest road to our buildings. As you can see here, we've got significant distances between the buildings and the road. We also, again, have that higher berming and landscaping, and all of that provides a significant buffer to folks being able to see our buildings. Ben noted this as well, but we do have multiple buildings with heights greater than 50 feet. One of those is shown here on the right-hand side. That would be one of those peptide buildings. And the building height requirement was approved through the BZA process with the mitigations in place that we've been talking through. So a few notes on utilities. For water, we will be receiving water from the City of Lebanon, and we have provided our peak and our average loads to Lebanon Utilities. The utilities project that was approved in October meets those loads, is my understanding there. We won't be implementing wells for water supply on site. And then fire water, we do have an on-site emergency response and fire response. So fire water for use on site will be run underground, and then it will be fed by the incoming water supply and on-site surge tanks. Wastewater, both sanitary and then aqueous wastewater from our manufacturing processes, will be routed to the Lebanon wastewater treatment plant, and that'll go through a new lift station on the campus. The wastewater will be treated for pH, so we will monitor pH and treat for pH. And then we will also be conducting regular sampling, and that's in order to comply with both local, state, and national requirements. So we do expect to do continuous monitoring for things like flow, and then we will set sampling frequencies for various chemicals, metals, oil, and grease as required by the City of Lebanon and IDEM as well. We are required, and again, Ben covered this, but we are required to apply for a permit to discharge water to the city. So that permit is publicly noticed and it's publicly available as well on the IDEM website. We have not applied for it yet. We expect to do that later this year. Natural gas will be provided by CenterPoint Energy via a new medium pressure pipeline, and that'll be run from existing pipelines that go around the campus right now. And then finally, electricity will be fed into the site from the existing substation along State Road 47. We have provided, again, expected electrical loads, and then as noted previously, we have a solar array that will be providing some of our on-site power. That's to offset that requirement. So this slide highlights our site entrances and our transit areas. So on the north side of the campus, as noted there, we have an emergency entrance. That's at the intersection of Witt Road and the North Campus boundary. That entrance will not be in normal use when site operations are ongoing, so it will be closed except in the event of an emergency. So all of our main operational site traffic will come in the personal entrance towards the south. Again, that'll be a 90-degree turn. And then we will split our delivery traffic. That'll go through a delivery entrance as well. A note about construction traffic. So during construction, we will be utilizing all three of those entrances. And we will have at least two open at all times to make sure that we can split traffic and help reduce congestion. Our construction partners, Lily and our construction partners, will manage our construction traffic through staggering construction start times. So there's good learning in the construction industry of doing that through COVID. So we'll use some of that learning to help stagger our start times. We'll be utilizing carpooling and traffic control. And then again, we'll be offsetting deliveries from that main construction traffic. So all of that will help reduce the overlap and the congestion during construction. Additionally, we recognize that we will have to keep working with all our partners here, so we are planning to continue to meet with the city and the county to monitor construction traffic through that phase and then make any adjustments as necessary. So I'm going to pause there and just say that those are the main topics and highlights that I wanted to share from the development plan and what we've submitted. I am planning in the next couple slides to share a little bit more about site operations. This isn't part of the development plan, but we do see the value in sharing this information and hopefully answering any questions that you have. Okay. This slide, just a note, this is another rendering of one of our buildings. Ben showed some, and I'll have a couple more pictures, and we'll talk about some of the architectural finishes as well. So I'll start with our manufacturing processes. We said earlier, we will have 2 manufacturing sites. So LP2, the smaller of the 2 sites, that's a cell and gene therapy site. The manufacturing processes there, they're aqueous or water-based, and we expect minimal waste from those processes. For the second site, LP1, so we will be we'll be manufacturing distinct types of API molecules. So those will be peptides, small molecules, and oligonucleotides. You saw the buildings labeled as such. At a high level, those 3 processes involve similar steps. And that's shown, apologies, it's a little small, but it's shown on the slide at the top right. So the processes start with a variety of raw materials depending on what the product is, and then chemical solvents. So solvents are used to dissolve different substances and then to facilitate the chemical conversions that turn those raw materials into our final API product. So the materials enter the process and then they proceed through different processing steps, the first of which is a synthesis step, and you could have multiple synthesis steps. We've shown one here for the sake of simplicity. The synthesis is what takes that raw material and it makes it into the API. So after that, we continue to refine that. Essentially, we purify it and then turn it into its final form. A lot of times that's a dry powder. So those additional process steps would be things like crystallization or precipitation or drying. And at the end of that, we have our API product. Again, the API is the active ingredient in what patients take, and the therapeutic areas that are currently impacted by the peptides and the small molecules are diabetes, cancer, and autoimmune disease. So I mentioned previously the campus in Lebanon will be an advanced manufacturing campus. So we are utilizing best-in-class technology, high levels of automation, rigorous process and quality controls. And on this slide, you can see some pictures of similar Lilly facilities, and that gives you a little bit of a feel for what our manufacturing facilities actually look and feel like on the inside. These pictures are recent manufacturing expansions dealing with similar types of processes that we'll be doing here in Lebanon. So you can see the facilities are designed to be safe, to be clean, to be streamlined. They're contained, so we utilize closed processing throughout, which means we don't have open processing or open lines. Our equipment and our facility finishes are maintained at a high standard, so we do a lot of preventative maintenance. And then our facilities are reflective of the design, the quality of design, and the safety of design that we put into them. So like all manufacturing processes, one of the outputs of making those APIs is we also make waste. So I'll talk a little bit about how we handle that waste. So in particular, the processes in LP1 produce solvent-based liquid waste. And throughout this life cycle of using solvents, both handling from the beginning when they come onto site to when they leave site, we have controls in place to protect our employees and the environment. And we design and we operate to ensure compliance with applicable laws and regulations. So some of those controls that we have in place include design elements like fail-safe valves. So those protect from spills or releases. We have correct materials of construction for the materials that we'll be handling. We have automation controls that are designed to identify and alarm and protect when processes are outside of their normal operating range. And then, of course, we have high levels of training for all employees that work on these processes. To minimize the amount of solvent, I mentioned this actually at our first meeting, to minimize the amount of solvent used and the waste generated, we're investing in the capability to recycle and reuse the majority of our solvent-based waste on site. So that's solvent recovery. So that greatly reduces our off-site shipping quantities, and it also reduces the amount of raw material coming into the site. For waste that's shipped off-site for disposal, packaging and containers for shipment of the material, they have to meet specific design requirements and testing requirements for use in transporting hazardous materials. Lilly and our transportation providers are responsible for following all US DOT regulations. So we also control emissions from our processes. So Ben mentioned our air permit. We utilize, or at this site, we're planning to utilize, again, best-in-class technology. We'll be using cryogenic condensation. And we'll also do continuous emission monitoring, and that ensures that we will always be in compliance with our air permit. Our air permit, again, is also publicly available via the IDEM website. It's also not filed yet, but we're getting very close to filing that one. We expect to file it probably by the end of March, likely by the end of March. So additional principles that we're abiding by as we design and we operate our site include designing to meet LEED certification, so that is Leadership in Energy and Environmental Design. So that type of certification encourages construction that's beneficial to the environment without wasting valuable resources. So it utilizes things like natural light, solar panels, electric vehicles. As mentioned previously, like I said, we're also using site solar for sustainability. We won't be disposing of waste on-site, and we won't have any buried lines carrying chemicals. That helps protect the quality of the soil and the groundwater. Equipment and process controls include high-efficiency utility equipment, best-in-class emissions monitoring, material containment in our facilities, and highly automated processes. And again, in addition to all this, we are highly regulated, so both the FDA and other worldwide health authorities for the medicines that we're making, but also the EPA, IDEM, DOT, OSHA, and others. Okay, so I think this is my last slide. So similar to the earlier slide that showed the internals of our buildings, I also wanted to highlight the exterior of our buildings. So what you see here on the left is a rendering of one of those peptides buildings. This was before we combined the head block, but it's there to show you the finish of the building. The other looks down that kind of front row of the site across the lab and admin buildings onto the peptide buildings. Again, these aren't completed design, but they show you, what we're aiming for from the look and the feel of our buildings. We're designing them to be warm. We're designing them to be inviting. We want our employees to want to work there and to be proud of working there. And they have a high level of architectural finish, and that reflects, making medicine. It's amazing work, and it's innovative, and we're very proud of it. So that is all the slides that I have and all the information I have. So I'm happy to take any questions that you might have at this point.
Any questions from the commission? All right, seeing none. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So with that, I would, again, open a public hearing on this topic. Again, this is in regards to docket number 23-03, the development plan approval. Please keep your comments to 3 minutes. Try and not repeat yourselves or anyone else that's gone before you. Welcome anyone to the microphone. More dramatic pause. So having the public hearing open, seeing no one headed to the microphone, I will go ahead and close the public hearing. And with that, any final wrap-up from Ben or questions from the commission to either Ben or the applicant?
I don't have any final comments. Again, just if there's any questions that we need to address between myself and Jennifer, we'd be happy to do that.
Good deal. Seeing none, I would entertain a motion in regards to docket number 23-03.
A motion to approve?
We've got a motion to approve docket number 23-03. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
We have a second. And can we call the roll? Second is Diane.
Heather and Diane, okay. Diane Scott?
Yes.
Dan Bayshore?
Yes.
Kevin Krulik,
Yes.
Corey Coontz,
Yes.
Brian, Keith Campbell,
Yes.
Heather Schaller,
Yes.
Ally Mullen,
Yes.
Lori Gross.
Yes.
Thank you very much, Commission. And that motion does carry, obviously. And with that, I see no other old business on the agenda, so we will move on to new business. First up is docket number 23-10, which is Clinton McCord requesting vacation of an unimproved right-of-way, a platted alley, between 517 Northwest Street and 523 Northwest Street in the Levi Lanes subdivision. Well, there we go. Mr. Reynolds.
Good evening, Planning Commission. Give a moment for some of my fans to step out. I appreciate it, Kurt. The docket I have before you tonight is a alley vacation request. It's a request to vacate a 16-and-a-half-foot section of public right-of-way. If you want to go ahead and pull up the screen for me, we can get us oriented to where we're at. We have West North Street, or Northwest Street along the western side, Chicago Street along the north. State Road 39 is just off the screen to the right here. As you can see highlighted in yellow, this is a 16-and-a-half-foot unimproved alleyway. This is a platted right-of-way that I can assume that at some point in time, our planners thought that this would be used as a public alleyway, but it was never improved. It currently is grass property that is currently used by the neighboring property owners for their own personal use, so they mow it and maintain it. They have requested to have this portion vacated from the city to the property owners, which our standards stipulate that half of the vacation would apply to the one neighboring property owner and the other half would apply to the other neighboring property owner. We did have a TAC review on this particular item. The City of Lebanon Utilities, Sewer, and Water Division had no utilities located within this right-of-way that would be impacted by this vacation request. There are no electric facilities that would be impacted by this. The City of Lebanon Fire Department had no issues with this vacation request, as they typically, they do not use alleys to fight fires, but they certainly would not use an unimproved alley. They would not drive their fire trucks through the yard to fight a fire. And the City of Lebanon Street Department had no issues with this vacation request. So in review of the submitted request for vacation of the subject unimproved 16-and-a-half-foot right-of-way per the exhibit, Lebanon Planning staff does recommend forwarding the vacation request to the Common Council with a favorable recommendation. And I'm happy to answer any questions, and I believe the applicants are here as well.
Would the applicants care to make any comment? Come on up to the microphone. That's for our folks watching on TV. They can't hear you in the crowd.
Yeah, basically, it's lawn, a couple of strips of concrete that I use as a driveway. Clint and I have, for years now, kind of subdivided where we felt the boundaries were and have been co-occupying the space, not to mention maintaining the trees. But other than that,
Yeah, real quick, can I just get your name for the record?
sorry, Jennifer Aruda. I'm at 523 Northwest.
Perfect, thank you.
I have a question for you. Sure. Are you planning to build anything in there? Or are you going to
Other
plan
than
to keep it
improving
green?
the drainage along the side of my house, maybe making the driveway a little nicer? No.
Thank you.
Mostly landscaping.
Any other questions from the commission? All right. So with that then, thank you very much. This is an item that requires a public hearing, so I will open the public hearing. Again, same rules. If you have any comments, please limit them to 3 minutes. The public hearing is officially open. If you want to make a comment, feel free to step up to the microphone. Seeing no sudden movements and minimal talking in the crowd, I will close the public hearing. Any final questions for Matt Reynolds or the applicant from the commission?
I would just like to clarify Mr. Campbell's question in regards to any construction within this proposed right-of-way. Should the applicant desire to build anything here, they would have to apply for a permit and would have to meet all the applicable setback standards and requirements of our RUDO. So at this time, nothing is planned to be built within this vacated area, but should they decide to or desire to, they would have to come back through planning to get those necessary approvals.
That also include a driveway?
Yes, yes. I think the driveway improvement, and maybe the applicant would be towards the rear of the property. I don't think it would be coming.
There's a cut-in with a couple of strips of concrete that are essentially
Yeah.
a driveway with grass in between and around it. It would basically be, anything that I would do with that would basically improve the drainage in that area and landscape. So nothing new that wasn't already there.
Yeah.
The owner before her put the driveway halfway on the state property.
Right.
She purchased the property, it was there,
Yep.
I think there's
and that is the situation it is right
Yeah.
now.
I believe Keith's point there was, so if they did intend to improve the driveway, I believe from a permitting standpoint, as long as they, Ben, why don't you just clarify that for us?
Yeah, except for where if they were going to be entering, making improvements in our right-of-way, they would have to get a right-of-way permit, but if on private property, there wouldn't be any permit required for a driveway improvement.
Right, so there are rules on what they can use as substrate, I believe, right? So we can't pour a substrate down anymore in the city?
Correct, yeah. I mean,
Meaning they have to be concrete or pavement?
it'd have to be a hard surface, any improvements like that, but the only time that they would need a permit for a driveway is if they're making improvements in the right-of-way.
Hope that clarifies for us. Any other questions for anybody? Okay, so with that, I would entertain a motion in regards to docket 23-10.
I make a motion, we approve docket 23-10.
I'll second.
We've got a motion and a,
Yeah. That's not the correct, I'm
Yeah,
sorry,
say
just
with
clarify,
that,
yeah, we need a recommendation to the
recommendation.
council, yeah.
Okay? So,
so we're looking for a motion for a recommendation to the common council,
Okay.
either favorable or unfavorable.
I make a motion that we have approve favorably docket 23-10 to the council.
And I'll second.
So we have a motion to forward with a favorable recommendation to the common council and a second. We don't need a roll call vote, do we? We can go old school? We can go old school. We're going to go old school. Are you okay with that? All right, so all those in favor of the motion, please signify with an aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Motion carries unanimously. Thank you very much. Matt, I think you're going to stay up here for a couple for us. That moves us right on to docket 23-13.
All right, Commission, before you, docket 2313 is a development plan application submitted by the Lebanon Community School Corporation. If we want to pull up our screen here, we are at Harney Elementary School. Just to orient us, we have Camp Street to the south, Holy Avenue to the west, and Garfield Street to the east. The applicant has proposed to make some improvements to the property, and I'll kind of walk through some of these as we go and kind of talk about these changes that they'll be making to the school and to the site. At the March BZA meeting, they were awarded 3 variance requests for the site, and we'll kind of touch on those as we go through as well. The applicant, as we see here, is proposing turning in the existing gymnasium. They'll be converting the existing gymnasium into classrooms. Because they will no longer have a gymnasium, they will be adding a gymnasium to the southern portion of the building here, where my cursor is highlighting. Because the playground is currently situated there, they'll be building a new soft playground area. They will be also adding additional administrative office space to the east side of the building. a new bus parking area to the southwest side, and then a parent pickup drop-off lane that will run along the southern portion and the western portion of the property, leading into the main parking lot. Again, that will be the pickup and drop-off lane for the parents to utilize. So the bus is currently staged on the south side here along Garfield, or along Camp Street. We'll be moving those into the new bus parking area, freeing up space for more parents to line up there, because that's been an issue for a while, is that pickup lane has been extraordinarily long in this area, and this will more than satisfy those needs. So as we review the development plan, I'll bring up the pretty picture here, so it's a little more enjoyable or pleasing to the eye. The variances that I spoke of, our UDO requires all new parking areas to have curbing. The bus parking area would not have curbing around it to allow this part of the property to sheet drain into the necessary detention areas. Parking lot interior landscaping also applied to the bus area. We've talked about it before, but large vehicles like buses and trucks don't mix well with interior parking landscaping and landscape islands, so they did receive variance for that. And then they also received a parking lot perimeter landscaping, so our UDO does require landscaping around the entire perimeter, but they have not only met those requirements so they're not meeting the specific requirements around the parking lot, but they're relocating those requirements elsewhere on the property. So some of the trees that would be required around this bus parking area have been planted along the parent pickup drop-off line, and that's for visibility and safety of the students around that area, so the bus drivers can see kids that may be walking from being dropped off or up the sidewalk from that area. This development plan did undergo technical advisory committee review, and I'll just, for the record, indicate that in the staff report, we did identify those comments from Lebanon Utilities, City of Lebanon Stormwater, the lengthy TAC review from the City of Lebanon Engineering Department, and get to my page here. The planning staff did undergo the review of the development plan application, and the development standards for the institutional zoning district, which Harney Elementary is in. They do meet the lot requirements, both lot size and lot width. They have a couple of lot frontages, 3 to be exact, since they're on face 3 different streets, and they do meet those necessary frontage setback requirements, both front and side setbacks. The parking standards have all been met. They more than meet they're required to have 75 parking spaces. They are providing 120 parking spaces, 4 of those being ADA compliant. The applicant did provide a photometric plan that shows that the lighting on the subject site does meet all applicable UDO standards. I did touch on the landscaping, but we did review the submitted landscaping plan, and the applicant did provide a plan that meets all the UDO standards, given the variances that were approved at the BZA meeting earlier this month. No additional signage is being proposed with the project, and the proposed building additions will match the architecture and building materials of the existing facility, and will also meet all applicable UDO standards. So with that, in review of the submitted development plan as presented, the Lebanon planning staff finds compliance with the Unified Development Ordinance requirements for the subject site. Staff does recommend approval of the subject development plan contingent on the following condition: that the applicant adequately addresses any remaining Lebanon Technical Advisory Committee comments prior to application for any building permits or site improvements. And more than happy to answer questions. The applicant is here as well to potentially talk through some stuff or answer any questions or concerns you may have.
Do we have any questions from the commission for Matt?
Matt, where the buses go out, is it one way in only? According to the arrows, it looks like only one way in from...
No, the bus parking area will be a 2-way drive. They'll be able to enter off of Garfield Street, and they would exit back out onto Garfield Street.
Right, but they'll have to turn left and right. Is it a different lane for each one? Or are they going to have to back up single file?
I can maybe let the applicant address that a little more. It appears to be a a two-way drive aisle, one way in, one way out, but maybe as they're exiting, they may utilize both lanes to go right and left, but I can let the applicant address that.
Any other questions for Matt while he's at the podium? The applicant care to speak?
Good evening, members of the commission. My name is Kent Franzen. My office is at 225 West Main Street, and I'm the attorney for the applicant, the Lebanon Community Schools. Matt's done a nice job of summarizing the proceedings to date. We have with us here tonight representatives of Cash Wagner. They are our civil engineering and surveying firm who've done the drawings and helped with the layout of the property and the design of the structures on the property. And we also have representatives of Gibraltar Architects, who are our architectural firm for this project. I'm not sure, Mr. Wagner, I think from Gibraltar, can answer the questions about the bus traffic in and out. I can't remember the details of that, but the plan meets the requirements of the Unified Development Ordinance, given the variances that were obtained, and I think the plan meets the requirements, and it would be subject to approval of this commission once you have your questions answered. Anybody want to speak to the bus routing? Who's the right one for that?
Everyone's pointing at everyone else. And of course, it's the guy in the middle of the room that needs to get out, right?
Yeah, my name is Dale Wagner, architect with Gibraltar Design. And Matt, how do I get back to the, oh, there it is, okay. Yeah, so buses coming in here, parking, loading up, and then this arc is raised around, so it really is, during beginning into school, pickup, drop off and pick up, they will be one way in, one way out. They're not going to be, coming in and out while they're loading. So they'll be parked there, kids will load the bus, and then they will all leave, essentially peel off. So that's how that's functioning right now.
According to the plans in here, just looking at the actual detailed, it looks like at the narrowest point, it's 26 feet.
Yeah, good.
Is that? So at its narrowest point, if need be, two could pass each other.
Oh yeah, one passing, if one got there late, there's definitely room that they could pass, yes.
And then the other question, based on that picture, I don't think it shows very clearly, I'm going to call it a horn shape coming out, is not clearly defined on there, but it looks as though they're going to make that turning radius both north, would that be north and south? Excuse me. So they'd be able to make that turning radius both directions.
Yes.
So currently, where do the children walk when they're walking to school? Are they going to be walking past that entrance and exit where the buses are? Or are they going to be rerouting them to go to a different side of the building?
For the bus?
For the children that are walking, I know that there are cross guards on that corner, close to that corner, and kids will, when they walk to school, they'll go to the front of the building. Are they going to be walking along that sidewalk that will cross over the bus entrance and exit?
No, there's another walk that's further down, there you go. That's to the west of the bus parking. So, and it will be something that we'll get used to, but that's the plan right now, that they would go out here and on up.
Oh, so they'll go, okay, all right.
Yeah, so it appears as though they would,
Coming from the north, they would come down,
Got it.
and then, yeah.
Okay.
yeah, so they would physically be able to cross there, but I believe the way they direct them right now is they actually direct them to that new path that they put in.
Okay.
That comes into essentially what is the side of the school there.
Okay, good.
That he's talking about. I think
And
that's
the plan now
direction
is
they-
Currently the bus.
kids would stage here, come on out.
Yeah, it's currently the
And
bus.
that's why we got widened the sidewalk here and everything, so
Perfect.
they'd have
Okay.
some third space there.
And then your car riders are
Yep.
essentially flipping from the front of the building to what I would call the back of the building where the gym is currently.
West side of the building. Yep.
I had a question on the car section that's being created, is there going to be like a curb separation between actual Camp Street and Hoy and that?
The extra lane that we're putting in, you mean there?
Yeah, that goes all the way around.
Yeah, no, there would be no curb between the new lane and the existing road that's there now. Is that what you're asking? No, there's
Yeah.
no curb there, I don't believe, that they're making.
We are,
We talked about striping of that.
it would be striped, and we've talked with the school about adding some plastic lane delineators. And then the sidewalk would be separated by a curb. So pedestrians walking adjacent to the drop-off aisle would be behind a curb.
All right. Any other questions from the commission for the applicant or for Mr. Reynolds? Good deal. Thank you guys very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
This is an item requiring a public hearing, so I will officially open the public hearing in regards to docket number 23-13. If anyone has any comments, please limit it to 3 minutes. Feel free to step on up to the microphone. Got it. No one moving. Oh, Matt, would you like to make a comment? Oh, I got all excited. Seeing no other sudden movements towards the microphone, I will close the public hearing. Any final questions for anybody? So with that, I would entertain a motion on docket 23-13.
I make a motion to approve the subject development plan contingent on the applicant addressing any remaining TAC advisory committee comments.
So we have a motion to forward with approval. Forward with a positive recommendation, my apologies.
Second it.
Approval on this one? Okay. And we have a second from Keith. Let's go ahead and do a roll call on this one.
Diane Scott?
I am going to abstain because I'm an employee of the school district.
Okay. Dan Bayshore?
Yes.
Kevin Krulik?
Yes.
Roy Coontz?
Yes.
Keith Campbell?
yes,
Heather Schaller?
Yes.
Ali Mullen? Yes. Lori Gross?
Yes.
All righty, that motion does carry. Thank you very much. And that moves us directly to 23-14, which is also our friend, Mr. Matt Reynolds.
All right, this is going to sound eerily familiar to the last one, but we're moving to the southeast side of town now. We're going to move to Perryworth Elementary School, where the Lebanon Community School Corporation is proposing similar changes and additions that we just saw at Harney Elementary. Got our pretty colored map up here that we can see. Their additions that we'll be making to the property will primarily consist of building additions on the north side for classrooms, along the west side as well, additional classrooms. On the east side, in the kind of the burnt orange area, they will be expanding the cafeteria kitchen area to make it larger and more efficient. We are adding some additional parking along the east side of the property, another bus parking area, a soft playground. We are extending the existing parking lot to accommodate more parking, and then also adding a pickup and drop-off lane, similar to what we saw at Harney, but this one will come off of South 400 East along the east side of the property. This project did receive 4 variance requests during the March 6 BZA meeting. The 3 of them were identical to what we heard with Harney Elementary. The parking lot curbing area for the bus parking, they were given relief from that requirement so that this area can sheet drain to the adjacent swales. The parking lot interior landscaping, they received relief from parking lot perimeter landscaping. And then the 4th one that was different from the Harney is they did receive a setback variance on the east side here from this new addition. One of the things that we found was this property is still zoned SF. When it was annexed into the city, it was never rezoned to an institutional zoning district. So it still had to abide by the SF standards. And when you factor in the right-of-way that the city required them to set aside along South 400 East, they did not meet the necessary setback requirements. So they did receive a variance for that, and that all four of those were approved at the March 6th BZA meeting. Again, this particular application did undergo technical advisory committee review. City of Lebanon Utilities did not have any specific comments because do not provide sewer or water to this area. City of Lebanon Stormwater did indicate that all items were satisfactorily addressed. The City of Lebanon engineer, 2, 3, probably 6, 7 pages of City of Lebanon engineering comments.
Wait till I have a staff.
And then as review of the development standards, Lebanon planning staff did review the requirements of the UDO standards for this particular district and did find that they do meet the necessary lot size requirements, lot widths, the lot frontages. The setbacks were met if you consider the variance that was approved at the March 6th meeting, as well as the side setback variance, or side setbacks were met. The UDO parking requirements, they're required to provide 80 spaces, they're providing 159, so they more than satisfactorily address those, and pretty much double. The applicant did submit a photometric lighting plan that does meet all the necessary terms of the UDO. The landscaping and buffer yard approval, the submitted landscaping plan does meet the applicable requirements of the UDO, considering the variances that were approved earlier this month. No additional signage was provided for this particular expansion, and the architectural review, the proposed building additions will match the existing architecture and building materials of the facility and will meet all other applicable standards of the UDO. And in review of the submitted development plan as presented, the Lebanon planning staff does find compliance with the Unified Development Ordinance requirements for the subject site. Staff does recommend approval of the development plan contingent on the following condition: that the applicant adequately addresses any remaining City of Lebanon Technical Advisory Committee comments prior to application for any building permits or site improvements. And again, happy to answer any questions or concerns that anyone may have.
Any questions from the commission for Matt? Any questions for the applicant? Perfect. So I might be a broken record here, but we're going to go ahead and open a public hearing in regards to docket number 23-14. You know the rules at this point, so feel free to step up to the microphone if you wish. Oh, we have some chair stirring. That is about it. All right, so I will go ahead and close the public hearing. And with that, any remaining questions for Matt? Or I would entertain a motion. I would venture to guess that Diane is not going to motion on this item.
I make a motion to approve the subject development plan contingent on the applicant adequately addressing any remaining City of Lebanon TAC Advisory Committee comments.
So we do have a motion.
I'll second.
We have a second. Ms. Scott, am I assuming we're going to abstain from that one? All right. So noting her abstaining already, we're going to go ahead and make this one a little more simple. All those in favor, please signify with an aye. Aye. All those opposed, same sign. That motion does carry. Thank you very much. And last and certainly not least, I do apologize, folks. Docket number 23-19. Matt, your work here is done. Please bring in the closer. Ben, welcome, sir.
Thank you, Commission. The last item here is an annexation petition on the north side of town. If they would bring the screen up, we'll show you this area. For those of you that have been on the commission for a little while, you may recall that a few years ago, we annexed a small portion of this property at the south end here, where it's adjacent to the existing city limits on the south side on 300 North. So again, this is 300 North to the south, State Road 39 to the east, and CSX Railroad to the west. And so this annexation was just finalized here just recently with a deed split that was done. And now this is the second phase of the annexation to bring in the remainder of the Butler Ross property and then also some portions of the Weber property that surrounds it that you see outlined here in yellow. So again, as I mentioned, this is a 100% voluntary annexation, meaning we have petitions for annexation from each of those property owners on file. And this is going to be a proposed development. We don't have any concepts at this time. They're working through that right now to put those concepts together. And we'll come back at a later date as part of their rezone application for consideration for the commission here and then also the council for the rezone. So given the fact that we do not have a concept plan or proposals for development at this time, the ordinance would suggest that the recommendation from the Plan Commission would be to assign it to our essentially default zoning classification, which is a low-density single-family residential classification. In this case, it's SF, single-family residential. And again, from a process perspective, because this is an annexation, the Plan Commission's role is to provide a recommendation on the zoning classification for the property, and they forward that recommendation onto the council. The council is responsible over 2 meetings to consider the annexation ordinance and the recommendation of zoning from the Plan Commission. After that second meeting, assuming adoption, then there's a 30-day waiting period before that annexation is effective. So that would essentially be the process for annexation. Once the annexation is effective and it is essentially in our zoning jurisdiction, then the applicant could come back with those concept plans and rezone applications for consideration by the Plan Commission. So unless or until the annexation is effective and adopted, then at that point, then we'll have the rezone applications and further details on the development. So given the fact that there is no concept plan, the UDO would suggest placing on that default zoning classification. Given that, planning staff has recommended that the Plan Commission recommend the single-family residential SF zoning classification to the Common Council for the proposed annexed territory. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions if there are any at this time.
Any questions from the commission? So just point of clarification, this is not in reference to the annexation itself. This is simply a recommendation of the zoning for the annexed parcel if the council were to choose to do so. Okay. Public hearing, right? I'm sure the audience would be, would the applicant like to speak? Nope. Yes?
Nothing more,
Maybe?
nothing more to
Nope.
add.
Got it. And so with that, in true shocking fashion, I will open another public hearing in regards to docket number 23-19, consideration of the zoning for a potential voluntary annexation into the city of Lebanon. Any comments on docket number 23-19? Nothing. Got nothing. All right, so I will close the public hearing. And with that, any final questions or comments for Ben?
And I assume there are some folks in here that are interested in what's happening with this property. You will be notified again when a rezone comes in. So any neighboring property owners will receive additional notification when that rezone application is filed. And then we'll have an additional hearing in front of this board with additional details about what's being proposed at a later date. So once it's in our jurisdiction, then we can hear that rezone application. You guys will all get notified again.
Got it. So with that additional information from Ben, I would entertain a motion on a recommended zoning classification to forward to the Common Council.
I'll make a motion to recommend the single-family residential SF zoning classification to the Common Council.
We have a motion to recommend SF. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
We have a second. So on that, I would, we'll go the quick way on this vote. So all those in favor, please signify with an aye. Aye. All those opposed signify with the same sign. That motion does carry unanimously. All right, folks, I think that wraps up all of our new business. Any other business to come before the commission? Seeing none, I would entertain a motion to adjourn. This should be the
So we
easy one.
adjourn.
We've got a motion to adjourn.
Second.
And a second. All those in favor signify with an aye. Aye. Motion does carry. We are now adjourned. See you at the next regularly scheduled Plan Commission meeting.